I think we should give him another hand just for trying to keep up with that music. Let's give him another hand. That's definitely called improvising, I think, but I'm glad they didn't ask me to sing. It would be even worse than what that was. So I'm so glad to see all of you here tonight. And this has been a time in Warsaw where we have, it's been a labor of love, hasn't it? It really has. So, and this time comes up too quickly each year, but my purpose tonight is to introduce our speaker. There's an old joke about somebody who died and went to heaven, and as they were walking around, they realized that nobody from the Salvation Army was there in heaven. Now, before you get too worried, okay, finally the person went up to St. Peter and said, you know, I noticed that William Booth and his army of soldiers and Salvationists are not here. He said, what happened? If you're in the Salvation Army, you don't make it to heaven? And St. Peter goes, oh no, you don't understand. He said, the Salvation Army heard there was a big fire, so they decided to go and serve coffee and donuts. I know that's an old joke, okay? So, but I will assure you, Salvationists are going to heaven because they know Jesus. But tonight we have someone who's going to come and share with us who actually has been to hell and back. And he has a compelling story to tell. And so it's a privilege to have him here tonight. One thing I will tell you, don't ask him how his health is, because I asked him when he was up at Syracuse, and he kind of gave me this steely glare, like, don't ask me that. So I haven't asked you that tonight, have I? So, because that is a concern for people who served in that, but I'm not asking you that night. We're just glad you're here tonight and healthy, and your lovely wife too. We're glad you're here as well. So Major Bob, come up and share. He is the state director of the Salvation Army in Indiana.
One day at a time with my health. That's the way it works, right? We only get one day at a time. Well, it was my privilege to serve for the Salvation Army at Ground Zero as a chaplain to the fire department of New York. And the reason why they needed someone like me to go and do that job was because they had 343 firefighters that died that day. And there were many other thousands of people who also perished. But for the fire department of New York, their concern at that moment was their firefighters. They had 6 chaplains. One of them was very sick, terminally ill. The other one was Father Michael, who you saw they were carrying him out in one of the pictures there. He was seated and they were carrying him out. He actually had somebody land on him that was coming out of the building, and he was killed at the scene. So that left 4 chaplains to do 343 funerals. And it made them realize that they needed some help from the outside. Salvation Army asked me because I was a chaplain with the fire department as well as a Salvation Army officer, certified in critical incident stress management and other things along the way. So I went there and I served there in New York for 21 days on the pile. A very difficult place to try and explain to you exactly what it was like. And if there's anyone here in this room that was actually there, you'll understand it was very eerie. Steam rising up from this pile of rubble that was 7 stories tall. It was still burning, and it was in excess of 2,400 degrees Fahrenheit. It was a rather interesting place to be called to go and work. The job that the fire department was given, along with many other volunteers and workers, was to do body recoveries of those people that perished in the fire and in the collapse of the World Trade Centers. People in that particular incident were pretty much unrecognizable. However, firefighters had the protective gear that was on, and so many of the firefighters were recognizable. And so we dug. We dug in rubble, and we looked for the remains. However, there were many other stories that took place while this was going on. At Ground Zero, there was a lot of anger. There were a lot of people that were upset. A lot of people that wanted revenge. They wanted something to happen immediately. There were stories of what happened when the planes hit the towers. So what did the fire department do? And a call came out at Engine 10, Ladder 10, which is the fire department right across the street from the World Trade Center. And they sent their team in immediately to go into the World Trade Center. One person, one firefighter had to stay behind and man the communications. And after a period of time, the tower collapsed. When the tower collapsed, the force of that tower was considered to be like an atomic bomb. And the force went through Engine 10, Ladder 10, front door, where he was standing, and it blew him completely to the back of the firehouse, and he smashed up against the back wall. Unconscious, he lay there. Shortly, he came to and staggered out of the firehouse, only to see something that no one should ever have to see. He later was sent home, and it was several days later when he returned to his first day of duty, and that was the day that I was there in Engine 10, Ladder 10. Wormwood firefighters, my job was to go there and to try and listen to the difficulties, the challenges that they were dealing with in order to help them continue to do the job. Of course, some of the things that they've seen or experienced there were very traumatic to them, and they had to figure out how it was that you would go back, and they always went back. But we had some times where we spoke together and we cried together. This one firefighter, I had the privilege of going up to him and asking him, was there anything that I could do for him? And you can only imagine the scene that took place shortly after I asked that question. It's something that's just in my mind, as fresh as this could happen just a moment ago. He got right up in my face, nose to nose, and he proceeded to cuss me out in every word that you could ever possibly imagine from a nice New York firefighter. I even think that he cussed me out with an accent. Many people came and got around him, and they went to grab him to get him away from me, and I said, no, leave him alone, and he continued to just shout out all these vulgarities. And then he stopped. Remember, he was this far away, and he just kept staring into my eyes. And he reached his arms around me, and I reached my arms around him, and he broke down, and he cried, and he cried, and he cried. And so did I. We had an opportunity then to talk about what had happened. Certainly there was nothing that I could say that was going to change what had happened or even help him maybe to get along for the rest of his life. But for that particular moment, it was enough to help him get through the day. I had an opportunity to speak with firefighters who were driving their rigs. And one came up on the scene when the building was still on fire, and just shortly before the collapse. And the chief said to the driver, "Let everybody out here, and I need you to stretch your hose out that way." And so he took off with the truck and he drove that way. And as he drove, the building collapsed on all the people that he just dropped off as he was stretching out the hose. I had a chance to talk with him. What do you say? He was hoping that he would have been one of them, standing there to die, and now he had to deal with the guilt, the survivor's guilt of not being one that was killed. Police officers, very difficult time for them as well, as many police officers died also in the collapse of the World Trade Center. There were many, many things that took place. We had opportunities to work with people who came, and their sole purpose that they were allowed on the scene was to be encouragers, to the people who were working. Some celebrities showed up. Arnold Schwarzenegger came, and it was interesting. He didn't say, "I'll be back." But he worked alongside these individuals and gave them hope. Some of you know the preacher, the evangelist Charles Stanley. He has a little radio show, television show, maybe it's not so little, out of Atlanta. And he came to work alongside of me, and we worked. Charles Stanley was down on his hands and knees digging in the ground, helping to try and find the remains of firefighters. Toby Keith was another country star who came. I had never ever heard of Toby Keith in my entire life. And he showed up and everybody said, he's a big country star. And so I said to him, "Hi Toby, my name's Bob. I've never heard you sing, and you've never heard me preach, so we should get along just fine." He was an amazing man. He also went there, shook hands with everybody, talked to people, and dug in the pile, helping to look for those who were lost. There's so many stories. You can't possibly tell them all when you've been there for 21 days. I can tell you that some things that I remember, though, were people who would wash my feet when I would go, because all the dust and the debris and the toxins and everything else that were on my boots, they didn't want them to be in the firehouse. And so as I would walk to the firehouse, someone would wash my boots. And then I would walk into the firehouse. There were people who were serving food and water, and people that just stood on the outside of Ground Zero, a large area several blocks away. And all they did was wait there so that they could put their hand on the workers as they left, and they would touch them, say nothing. They were just thankful that they had an opportunity to be a part of what was taking place there. To this day, I still don't understand why it had happened. Why almost 3,000 people died on that day. But I do know that out of that came many, many things, and people have been changed forever. The United States was changed forever at that time. Most of it was not stuff that we wish we had to change, but many things changed for the better as well. For that particular time, all Americans came together. It didn't matter what color you were, what religion you were, what part of the country you lived in. When you were there, you were one, with one purpose, and that was to help those who were lost, to bring closure to their families. I was there when they pulled that cross out of the rubble. I had the privilege to sign that cross before they put it up on that platform there. It's been moved now. It's been the topic of so many legal battles, whether the cross should be there or not. It's a symbol. It's not a cross. It's two I-beams that just happen to be connected and stood in the rubble exactly like that when they pulled out. It was my privilege during those times to pray with the people who allowed me to pray. When I went there, my name was Father Bob. I'm not a Catholic priest, but everybody in New York's Catholic, so I must have been a Catholic priest. Actually, the Catholic priest came and shared with me, and they said, "I want to teach you how to give last rites." And that was such a privilege to learn that. And they said, because when you go on that pile, we would like you to do that in case it's a person who's Catholic. My job, I climbed to the top of the pile with the firefighters, in the steam, in the heat. And when we had found the remains of a firefighter, I would go with them into the procession, go up there in the area and wait for the procession. They would lay the black bag on top of the Stokes basket. And it was my job, after it was all over, to close and zip the bag. And together up there with the firefighters and construction workers, whoever were there, we stood together and we said the Lord's Prayer. And after we did that, I would lead the procession down the hill. And we walked all the way down. There were thousands of workers who stopped what they were doing. They stopped digging. We would all walk together in silence and stand at attention as the body, the remains, came through those lines. I would lead that, and we would walk all the way from the pile, blocks away, to the temporary morgue, where we would lay the remains to rest, and then began the identification process. When that was over, many, many times, we had to kind of debrief. What did we just see? What just happened? How are we doing? And then we got to do it again. Because often, as soon as you finished, you were called back up there to do it again. It was my privilege to do that. I'm honored this day to be able to stand here in front of you and speak because for some reason, this young guy, many years ago, got to go and serve in this particular way. And I thank you for having me here. It has been my privilege and my honor. I'll be happy to talk with you afterwards. But I just take this opportunity to thank you for coming and just wish God's best blessing on every one of you. God bless you and thank you.